All right, so this is class video number 6. Okay, not 6:15, but 6. I got the other one up yesterday. It took a lot of hours for my computer to suck that into YouTube, or I should say YouTube to suck it from my computer into its own little thing. So, but it is there. Has anybody watched it? You would have been the class that needed to watch it.
I watched parts of it.
Parts? The good parts?
Well, the first part.
What was the assignment?
Was it in the beginning?
Well, it's somewhere in the video.
I didn't know where it was.
You got to watch the whole thing. That's the...
I know. I watched it this morning.
Okay, so there's like a secret assignment in each video that you got to watch. And by the way, all the material that goes on in there gets tested. You're going to be tested on it. Okay, so you got to watch these videos. I'm lecture heavy. Now, a lot of my lecture is a lot of discussion, right, with you guys, and that's the fun part, right? We get to talk to you. But then I start saying stuff. And somewhere in there, I start defining things. Or trying to get out of you something, and then I state it. And those are the things that are going to be on the test. And please, I mean, when it comes crunch time and you're studying for exams and you have to watch 6 hours of videos just to study, that's a lot of, right? And so, you know, watch them, take the notes. Don't let this system we got going be the recipe for your failure. Oh gosh, it's time to wake up. That's my alarm.
Will our assignments be, like, do we have to turn them in person, or are they gonna be?
No, I'm gonna put a folder up, okay? So there'll be a folder, and the assignment was spoken about on the video, so watch the video. There'll be a folder for it, okay? They're always simple, but they're kind of reading assignments. They're like, and I'm gonna give you one today too, and so the people who aren't here have to watch the video to get that assignment. All right, does that make sense? So there'll be an assignment probably for every reading. And it's gonna go something like this. Bullet points, I like bullet points to keep things simple, of what you learned from the reading. And it's usually a who, what, where, when, why, how. Go through those kind of questions. Who wrote it? What did they do? When did they do it? How did they do it? How did it affect them? There's another one I want to know is, why is it important that you should know this? You got to tell me why it's important that you should know this. That's going to be the important one going forward. Because if it's just reading to spit back stuff that I say, then that's not important. It's important, you know, it's important for me to know certain dates and stuff, just to tell you these things. That's a job thing. But the underlying real importance is, let's take what happened on that date, you know, 1776. Why is not the date important? The date's important because something happened on that date. What happened on that date that's important? Okay, July 4th. It's that day they all got together at the beach and started a new tradition of fireworks and hot dogs and baseball, right? No, it is not, right? It is a day that resulted in death. Okay, they made decisions that killed people and died, okay? And they did so for reasons, and that's important. We want to know those reasons, and we want to know, are those reasons important to us today? Okay, so so whenever you get a reading assignment, you go, okay, he assigned this reading, and he'll put up the folder, and we'll put in our bullet points, who, what, where, when, why, how, right? I want all those, but why they did it, but why it's also important. Why was it written? Why is it important to me? Because all of this is, I'm not going to teach anything I don't think is applicable to you, okay? None of you are government majors. I would like you all to be government minors. And the reason is because you're all citizens of America. Even if you're not a citizen of America, you're a citizen somewhere. And so everybody is a citizen, so it is important for them to know their government and how to work within it. Because you want your government to work for you, correct? And how do you get your government to work for you if you don't even know it? So that's kind of, now I wouldn't want a doctor who didn't know medicine, right? I want I want citizens who know the government. And since we're all citizens, we all, no matter what your job, you're all responsible for the government we have. There's a saying, the citizens get the government they deserve. What is meant by that? If we have a crummy government, it's because of you. A lot of people don't like Donald Trump. Well, why is there a Donald Trump in office? People voted him in. Why did they vote him in? So they didn't like the other options. Because the other options were bad, and they were really fed up with certain things. Trump's the result of something, and I don't necessarily want to say he's bad. He's not a bad result. I'm just saying he's the result, okay, of something. And it's not the result of stupid people voting. It might be the result of bad politicians doing things saying they were going to do something and never doing it. And here comes a guy from the outside and says, I'm going to do something, and I mean it. Does that make sense? Here's a little side note on Trump. People don't like him. They call him a liar, right? You've heard that be said about 1 million times, right? People don't hate Trump because he's a liar. If Trump were just a liar, the left wouldn't care. The problem is Trump tells the truth on certain things. I'm going to, as he said, he's going to put in judges that are conservatives, constitutionalists. The left doesn't like that. Why? Well, because Roe versus Wade. What is Roe versus Wade?
Isn't it about birth, like the
abortion?
Abortion.
It's what made abortion legal. You put a bunch of conservative judges on the bench, you get a majority in the Supreme Court. Roe versus Wade gets overturned. Abortion's no longer the law of the land. Roe versus Wade is no longer the law of the land, and all of a sudden now abortion's illegal. That's probably the main debate in politics still to this day. What the president's about, because the president appoints judges, and once the court and the left, that'd be the Democrats, you make use of the Supreme Court, make use of the court system to overturn laws they don't like. Okay, so once the court gets stacked with conservative judges, the left loses a lot of power, and they're not very happy about that. They're angry that Donald Trump told the truth in that. Not that he lied. They're angry that Donald Trump said he was going to build a wall. And he meant it. Not that he said it just to get elected and then ignored it, but an actual wall, that he actually wanted to build this wall. Okay? So now why is this important to his opposition? Well, because you give a bunch of people who've come from other countries into America illegally, they come here, you give them citizenship, they're now voters. Who are they going to vote for? The Democrats. You get rid of them and you keep illegal immigrants out, you're losing a voting block. It's about power again. Does that make sense? There are other issues. All of these regulations and taxes, he didn't lie about that. He told the truth, and that upsets the other people. Okay? So, if you don't like Donald Trump, it might be because you don't like the policies he's pushing, right? And a lot of people, even who like his policies, don't like his attitude. But that's all fair. I mean, come on, what politician nowadays has a nice attitude? They're all mean. Okay? Just watch Nancy Pelosi. She says some very vicious things. Okay? Hillary Clinton called all of us, all conservatives, terrorists at one point. Okay? You listen to Joe Biden, he's calling Republicans racists. That's not nice. So politics has gotten very dirty lately, okay? But we get the government we deserve, especially in America, because you're voting, right? Are you old enough to vote yet?
I'm 18, but I haven't voted.
Yeah, but why should you? Do you care about anything?
I do.
You do,
Yeah.
okay? So, but you need to know what you care about and why you care about it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you take that to the voting booth. Okay? Think about the issues, not the people, because if you think about the people, then you're going, oh man, these are horrible people. Right? But you're going to get the government you deserve. If you want a moral government, you're going to get a moral government. You want an immoral government, you're going to get an immoral government. Well, if the majority of people are immoral, they're going to get an immoral government. If you're complacent and lazy, you're going to get a lazy government. They're representing you. And they tend to take on the personality of the country. So, if you think of Trump as somebody who's not the best personality, don't blame him necessarily. Blame the country that put him in power. And that includes the people who don't like him. Okay? Because it's a cultural thing. You know, if we were all a bunch of teetotalers, we'd have a teetotaler for president. If all of us were. Okay? A guy like him would never be elected. All right, so let's discuss a little more about the contents of today's class, because obviously that's when we talk about assignments and the why, that's how we got all of this, was the why question. Why is it important when we do these assignments? We want to take the reading assignments, and every reading assignment I'm going to give you just a hint, okay? If you don't know what the assignment is, it's going to be a little reading assignment. Then I'll have quizzes, and I'm going to pull from the lectures and the reading assignments for those quizzes, okay? There'll be a midterm. It'll just be a larger quiz that regurgitates what you learn. And then there'll be a final which regurgitates the whole semester from start to finish. That's how I roll it. I like to just keep stacking it up so you don't forget. Does it make sense? Okay. All right. I brought a bunch of things in today. I think I brought in yeah, I did. Brought Federalist number 51, and I brought in the Declaration of Independence, and that was the reading assignment. I wanted you to do the who, what, where, when, why question on the reading on the Declaration of Independence, okay? That is the founding document of our country. It is grounded in natural law. You need to watch the lecture because we were talking about natural law. And we didn't get to natural law probably till the end. So it's very important that we talk about natural law, that there is a law before the law. I asked the question, is murder against the law because it is wrong, or is it against the law, or is it wrong merely because it's against the law? Is murder
because it's wrong?
Okay, it's wrong. Okay, so because it's wrong, we make a law. But then, you know, like with the abortion issue, people go, well, it's legal. Well, just because it's legal, does that make it moral? You say no. Slavery was legal, right? Does that make it moral? On what grounds do you judge such actions if you're not judging it against the law? So there's this idea that there's a natural law, a law that is above the written law, that exists prior to human inventions of laws, or the human, what we call positing of laws. And we judge laws and governments against the natural law. We discover the natural law. We do not create it. Now, the natural law requires the existence of God. I'm going to make the claim, okay? Natural law requires the existence of God and what's called the telos, the T-E-L-O-S, the telos. The telos means design or end. The word end means that for which a thing is designed Okay? What is the end of the eyeball? To see. Okay? There's a design to it. What is the end of the ears? To hear. Let's take it to something what Aristotle would use in his book, The Nicomachean Ethics. The end of shipbuilding is seamanship, to go out and sail the boat, right? We don't build boats for nothing and just let them sit there. We build boats to sail. What about generalship? Generalship has to do with military. It's the rank. Has to do with victory in war. You have generals to lead you to victory. Makes sense? That's the design or the end, the purpose. That's another synonym you could use, the purpose. What is the purpose of governments? The end. Why do we have them? See, the end existed before the government, and we created a government with that in mind. There are types of goods. This is Aristotle. There are instrumental goods and intrinsic goods. An instrumental good is something that is good for something. Let's take money. Money is good for something. What is it good for? Buying things. So the things you buy are better than the thing that you gave for it. You give money for a house. You'd rather have a house than the greenbacks, the little paper things. You get a car because you need to get to work and drive to and from work, to your home. So you give those greenbacks, which are instrumental, for the car. Is a car good for something? Yeah, it's instrumental. It's good for going to work, going home, going on trips, moving from one place to another, taking out dates, right? If you're a boy, you pick up a date, maybe she likes your car. Maybe she likes your car better than you. There's an old song, girls don't like boys, girls like cars and money. You remember it? Yeah. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with a girl wanting a guy who has the ability to provide. Okay? That makes sense. Especially if you're going to, if your goal is to be a homemaker and raise great children. That's an awesome job. A very difficult one. Right? And so the husband goes out, he needs a car, so he goes out and drives. But it's instrumentally good. So, the house is good for something. Keeping out the rain, putting all the stuff you have in there, the other instrumental goods. Those are all. But what is intrinsically good? Things that are intrinsically good are good for themselves. You are good for who you are. And if somebody treats you as an instrument, then get away from them. You are not an instrumental good. You are an intrinsic good. God created you, and He loves you as you are for who you are. So if the eyes are designed for sight, instrumentally, because that's the kind of thing they are, they're seeing things, and ships are floating things, and cars are driving things, and ears are hearing things. What are humans? What kind of thing are you? What do you do? Think about it. You're thinking things. Man is a rational animal. It's what makes us distinct from all other sentient beings, all other living, or I should say sentient, animate objects. You have rocks, those are inanimate objects, right? Then you have other that's contrasted with living things such as plants, but then you have other living things broken into animate versus inanimate living things, right? Plants versus animals. And how is man different from the rest of animalia? We have the ability to reason. And we reason what? Towards virtue. We reason towards certain things. The good. Okay? Now with natural law, we recognize this. We recognize that there are goods. Government is good for something in order to obtain the highest good. What is the highest good? Happiness. And that is why we have the right to pursue happiness. What is happiness? Happiness is that thing that is desired for itself. So if you look at the Declaration of Independence, it espouses all these things. That there's the God of nature, nature's God, that you are endowed. Talks about the end. It talks about your rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Catch the word happiness, and that being the ultimate good. That which is desired for itself. So this document is a very deep document, the Declaration of Independence. It is based off of natural law. It didn't give us our rights. It just stated that we have them. Now this is in contrast to what the king had and previous kings had viewed. This is in contrast to their view of what was called the divine rights of kings. That if God has placed them on the throne, it is their right to rule over their subjects. The rights were in the king, not in the subjects. But philosophy, throughout the ages, espoused certain ideas that caught on. And natural law could not be contained, where the people started catching on and saying, no, the rights were in man, and we, the governed, will give you consent to govern us. And if you don't have our consent, then we shall not be governed. Why? Because you were endowed by God. All men are created equal. You are endowed by God with these rights. And that's the individual now. That will radically shift the way governments work in the future. Okay? And this is all very deep stuff. It's very cool too. It just shows you the power of ideas, how they shape where we are. Okay? We're still battling in America the specter of communism. Where do I get that phrase, the specter of communism? The idea that the specter of communism haunts us. That's the very first phrase, statement in the Communist Manifesto. It's an idea. Ideas don't die, people do. Karl Marx has long been dead. But in America, we're still fighting over the first principles of our government. Whether or not we should get rid of the idea that God has endowed you with certain inalienable rights, get rid of that idea and take on Karl Marx's idea that the history of mankind has been the history of the haves versus the have-nots, the powerful versus the powerless, the rich versus the poor. And then we divide you into the oppressed and the oppressor. Okay? And this is the battle that is going on in the academy. That would be where we are. In schools, what you get taught. You go to U of H, I can almost guarantee they will teach you that you are either an oppressor or you're oppressed. Okay? And you will act accordingly. And the idea is to, what? Unchain yourself from the oppressed, redistribute what they have, and thus establish some egalitarian society. What is that called? Marxism. Okay? Those ideas are still present, and more present now probably than they ever have been, in our universities and in our films and entertainment and even sports, unfortunately, now. Okay? You're going to hear me preaching on this a lot. I hate communism. Okay? You know, I grew up during the Cold War. Okay? And we lived under the threat of the USSR starting to lob intercontinental ballistic missiles at us. We're always in fear of a nuclear holocaust, and now we have communists, in our midst. So I hate communists, no offense. Offense to communism, okay? I hate communism. There's a difference between people and the beliefs, okay? But we're in a battle, and you guys are in the middle of it. There's a good chance you will see our country become a socialist nation in your lifetime. Some of you might actually want that to be the case, and I'm sorry. And it will fail, okay? But we are in a battle right now, a battle of ideas. What we are learning right now is the original ideas that started this country, and then we're going to ask the question, should we keep these or should we get rid of them? Okay? Okay, let's read a little bit from the Declaration of Independence. And the reason I want to do that is because it follows what I say here. It says, the unanimous declaration of the 13 not capitalized United States of America, meaning they were individual states they were claiming to be, and that they were not one country, but they were 13 states, individual, that were united, okay? He says, and who wrote this? Thomas Jefferson wrote this, okay? Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, but I also want to let you know that he kind of stole a lot of the material from John Locke's treaties, two treaties of government, okay? Okay, I think it was the second one. And you can line them up right next to each other and you go, my God, if that was a student paper, he'd get an F, okay? That's how close it is, okay? The language, but he changes it a bit, okay? Just enough. But he says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, where does he get the word political from? That's a term used in philosophy. It has to do with the polis. What does the word polis mean?
Many.
What?
Many.
It has to do with the city. And you're kind of correct in a way that Aristotle said man is political by nature. What do you think he meant? Not that we vote, but that we gather. And that's why we have cities. Because we are political by nature. We're not solitary animals. We don't live alone. We live in groups. And once you live in groups, you have to ask the question, how should we then live? That's a biblical statement. Also a great book by the late Francis Schaeffer. But how should we then live? And once you ask that question, you go, how should we govern ourselves? What is the best form of government? That's what the early philosophers talked about. What the ideal society was. And they came up with this idea, utopia. And if you read Plato's Republic, I tell you what, you would never want to live under what he believed the ideal society would be. Okay? It is very communistic, and you have very little power. Because he believed that most people were not that wise, and only philosopher kings should be on the top. Okay? And he believed that some people just are not bright enough to govern themselves, right? If you're not bright enough to govern yourself, you need to be what? Governed. Okay? And so they regulated everything, how much you ate, how much you worked out, how much you prayed. You couldn't have your own personal shrines at your house, like you wouldn't be able to go in your home and pray. Stuff like that, where they controlled every aspect of your life. That's not utopia, that's dystopia. Dystopia is the bad society, okay? All right. So when he talks about, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands, that group, and they're going to break away, which have connected them with one another. They're breaking up, essentially. Who's America breaking up from? Great Britain, okay? King George III, okay? He says, when we do this, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature, natural law, right, and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. What is he saying there? He says, when we break up with you, you deserve to know why we're doing it. It's kind of like, I text the girl and I say, we're breaking up, and she says, why? And I say, because I don't like you anymore. And she says to me, you should at least do this to my face. And I say, no. She goes, that's horrible. You're a horrible person. I said, I know. That's why I'm breaking up with you. It's me, not you. Right? I've never done that. The last girl I broke up with, I probably wasn't texting at the time. You know, I had to do it by phone. Anyway, all right, moving on. He's breaking up. The colonies are breaking up with Great Britain, and he says you deserve to know why. Okay? He says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the what? Consent of the governed. This goes right to the face of the current philosophy of the divine rights of kings, right? That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, you remember I just told you what these ends are, what the word means, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its power in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Okay, so what do? If the government's not working, you alter or abolish it and you create a new one if you don't fix the old one. And what's the goal? To affect safety and happiness. So the government needs to provide safety and maybe at least most likely affect happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. What does that mean? He's saying that if you have a government that's been there for a while, you don't just change it for no reason at all, for something simple that could be fixed. Light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. Now, what's that saying? It's saying sometimes we tolerate too much. We allow certain injustices to take place. And we will tolerate these things, and we're accustomed to doing that, right? Because we're generally nice people, generally. I mean, humans are sinful by nature, but we tend to tolerate injustices. Right now, there's a lot of injustices going on both sides of the aisle that, some people would say this is an injustice right here. That the closing of restaurants is an injustice to all the business owners who are going out of business right now, right? That the mayor and Judge Hidalgo don't have the right to enforce this kind of stuff upon us. That this is tyranny, making us wear masks and stuff like that everywhere we go. Closing schools and closing restaurants and shutting down economies and breaking people, which allows them to lose their homes, right? And we're like, okay, we'll do it. And somewhere down the line, we're going to throw these masks off and throw a middle finger right at them. Because it gets too much somewhere down the line. There will be a straw that breaks the camel's back. Right now in California, they're saying kids can't even go trick-or-treating. What are they going to do? Go arrest a bunch of kids for trick-or-treating? Excuse me, you can take off your little cowboy hat, turn around, put your hands behind your back. Kids are like, ah! I just wanted some candy. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such governments and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present king of Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having indirect object the establishment of absolute tyranny over those states. To prove this, let the facts be submitted to a candid world. So he goes on for the next several pages in this case to list these things. He has refused to assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He's forbidden his governors to pass laws. That's self-government, right? He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation. By the way, representation is interesting. One of the things he's arguing for, first, okay, let's go back. What has happened around the colonies is Great Britain had a war, 7-year war, right? French and Indian War, right? Around this time. And did they win?
No.
Technically, yeah. But what happened?
Lost a bunch of money.
Yeah, war costs so much money. War is expensive. Now, where was this war fought? In Britain? In France? In America? It's an overseas war where the colonists are. So the Britons think, well, I mean, it was over there, man. Shouldn't they pay some of this money? And so what do? How do governments raise money? They tax. So the king's got to, and so what do?
Didn't they tax all their goods that were coming from Britain?
Yeah. There was the Stamp Act and the Sugar Act, right? And then somewhere, along the line, certain companies start profiting from all this. That's why we get the Tea Party, Boston Tea Party. And they're like, we are being taxed, but we have no say about how things are run. You're telling us from way over there how things should be run way over here, and we're sending our money way back over there, right? Taxation without representation. We don't like it. We do not like it. So there's two main reasons for the Revolutionary War. One of them is pragmatic, and it boils down to one thing: money. Money. Keep in mind, the colonists have mostly been ignored by England. Okay? So what was going on in the colonies really didn't affect the British. I mean, you get a war, now they need to make money off it. Not just make money, they need to recoup money. So these colonists have long been self-reliant and self-governing. And so now they want to say, when the king starts telling them, we're gonna take your money for things that you have no choice over, they're like, no, sorry, ain't gonna happen. We're done. And so a lot of it's about money. That's the pragmatic side and representation. The second one has to do with ideology. Ideology. The first principles of government. All of this made them decide to embrace the principles of natural law. And hence, that's why you have the first part of the Declaration of Independence talking about natural law, using natural law reasons. This would fly in the face of a guy who does not believe these people have rights. And so the war happens, and this was created in 1776. Now, at this point in time, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I want you to, though. Okay? That was your assignment. Okay. Now the Federalist 51. I'm not going to read it. It's too long. But once you throw off the bands, right, that tie you to the other country, we now have these 13 colonies, or states now. They're no longer colonies. They're referring to themselves as states that are united. In what? A cause. They're the United States. Lowercase united. Not the United States of America, the country. They're United States in a cause to disband from Britain. And once they do that, well, where do they go from there? Well, there's this debate over, this. And you have the Federalist Papers. You have two groups. You have the Federalists and Anti-Federalists, and we'll talk a little bit about them. But the point here is, during this time, and I'm going to put up a video. There's a great video on the Articles of Confederation. Okay, how it came to be, its strengths, its weaknesses, primarily its weaknesses. Nobody wanted to be the president of the Confederate, of the United States of America under the Articles of Confederation. Because it was a weak, non-powerful, barely a figurehead. Diplomacy was ridiculous because you had no power. You couldn't say, we will do this, because it was like herding cats, which is impossible. Anybody who has a cat knows that cats do what cats want to do. So much to talk about. Oh my gosh. Went through all that good stuff. Let's talk about principles. Okay, what's a constitution to begin with? What is a constitution? That's a question for you. I mean, we've already discussed it a little bit, but what is a constitution? Remind me your name in the back.
I'm Crystal.
Crystal, what's a constitution?
Well, it could be pretty much.
Have you read the American Constitution?
Yes.
What's it like? What's it sound like? If you were to read it, what does it kind of seem like?
I mean.
Now, by the way, Crystal, right?
Yes.
This question is just for you, so all of you can jump in and interrupt. Okay? What does the Constitution kind of read like? Have you ever read it? Think about when you read it. Was it entertaining? No, it's not all that exciting. It's not as exciting as the Declaration of Independence. Declaration of Independence is fighting words. What's it like? Rules? Well, what does it talk about? What does the Declaration of Independence talk about? I mean, not the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution talk about. Talks about the different branches of government. Did we not talk? Have we talked about the different branches of government?
Yes.
What branches of government are there?
The legislative, the executive, and
The judicial. First words of the current Constitution say what? In order to form a more perfect union. More perfect than what? Than the Articles of Confederation. They literally had to commit treason against that document. So we had the Articles of Confederation, which was a weak document, and it allowed the states to operate independently of each other as pretty much as independent nations. They would have treaties with other nations. They were coining their own money. That became a problem, right? They were asked to send money to the central government, and most of the states did not. Okay, they had no the executive branch was extremely weak, so it was really not a very unified country at all, and it was not perfect, for sure. It caused a lot of problems, and keep in mind, you know, the government wars cost money, right? And things need to be paid for, right? How do you pay for things? Again, how does the government get money? Taxes. It was impossible for them to collect taxes. So they were weak. It was a weak federal government. So in order to form a more perfect union, does it say in order to form a perfect union? No, a more perfect union, closer to perfect. More perfect than what we had. Perfect is without flaw. Is there a form of government on earth right now that is more perfect than the one we have? Thank you for saying no. I mean, if you said yeah, I'd go, okay, which one? Let's hear it. Maybe there is. I mean, clearly we have an immigration problem for a reason. Okay. I heard this funny thing, how these actors are like, if Trump wins, I'm going to leave this racist country and go to Canada, right? So somebody asks, why are you going to Canada? Why aren't you going to Mexico? It's because they're racist, because they want to go somewhere that's even more white. You know, that was the answer. So anyway, the hypocrisy, right? Well, anyway. In order to form a more perfect union. Okay, now did everybody agree to this Constitution? Were they all like, oh, this is a great idea? The answer is probably no. Okay? So there were plans that had to be made and compromises that had to be made. What was the big deal with the Constitution? It had to do with representation again. Remember the big issue with representation with England? Well, the debate was over how do we get representation in the legislative branch. And you got states with more people in them. And then you have states with less people in them. And the states with less people were all like, why would we join your country? When you guys over there have more people than we do, you guys are going to basically rule us. Why would we want that? We're not going to do that. We're not going to sign this thing. We're not going to help ratify this Constitution. Like if you based the representation, the legislative branch, off of just population, the higher populated states would just rule over the lower populated states. Okay, so imagine all the legislation, let's get rid of our Senate, right? And just go with the House of Representatives, and we have a representative, roughly about 7,700 people per representative, I think it is. But that's the way it used to be. Now it's like 300,000, okay? Because we've capped, okay, this stuff is. Anyway, so these representatives are like, based on population, you got, let's just take New York. New York City has the highest populated city in America, right? Then we take LA, and we take Chicago, These are all very extremely left democratic cities, right? They would basically rule over places like Montana, Alaska, Idaho, Nebraska. And some of you are going like, yeah, that's a good thing, right? Not if you're from Idaho. Not if you're from Montana. You're like, why would I want Chicago ruling over my life? In fact, there's a group of people in Illinois that really just want to kick Chicago out of the state of Illinois, make it its own state. Why do you think they want to do that? Because the other political party can't win anything, and it's ruled by one city. The whole state tends to be ruled by one city. This really highly populated city is making decisions for the rest of this big state, and their voices are not heard because they're choked out by the sheer volume of Democrats in the city. And all these rural towns are like, well, that's not how we want to live our lives, right? We don't want to be governed by the way you govern yourselves in the city, right? Is that fair? So they're saying, we want you out of here. Most of the time it's the city that they want to leave. In this case, it's the rest of them. They're like, we want you to get out of here. Take your views and your values, your godless values and your abortive rights, and you go be your own state. We don't want that here in our country. We believe in God, you know? And anyways, that's kind of the rhetoric, right? They're all excited. They're all, man, get out of here, you know? Well, anyway, so imagine this. We're going to start a country, and you got like 10 million people in your state, right? And you've got like 200,000 in your state, and you don't believe the same things those guys do you? No, you don't. And so you're like, I don't want her ruling us if it's straight representation by population. So they come up with a compromise. And that's why we get two chambers, right? A bicameral system in our legislative branch. It's called the Great Compromise. Where we came up with the Senate. We have the legislative branch, we have the lower house, which is called, lower chamber, which is called the House of Representatives. Then we have the upper chamber, which is the Senate. And the Senate, every state has 2 senators. How many states do we have? 22? At the time, 13.
Yeah.
But now we have 50. I'm just kind of throwing it out there, see if you're paying attention, okay? Now this debate has not died. What did giving every state 2 senators do? It equaled the footing, meaning New York may have millions of people right now, and Idaho may have hundreds of thousands of people, maybe 1 million people. New Mexico has like 1 million people in its state. New Mexico is equally represented in the Senate to New York. In the House of Representatives, they are vastly outnumbered. See the difference? Because it's on population, it's 435 members of the House, okay? New York, Texas is a big one. California has, I lived in California. A lot of people, lots of representatives out there, okay? Do you want to be doing here in Texas what Californians and New Yorkers want you to be doing? They'd kill this city, by the way. They would kill this city. They'd kill the state, but the city. Why would they do that? Energy policies. This city is built on oil. Without oil, the city would be a wasteland. Okay? If AOC gets in charge and gets rid of all fossil fuel, we're in trouble, guys. Okay, we're financially, we'd be in big trouble. She would kill this town. I don't even know where I'd move. Prague. You know where Prague is? Czech Republic. There's a reason for that. So, there's a great compromise. How would you set it up, though? I mean, would you agree to that? Does that make sense, that compromise? What form of government would, now, given the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, would you want to put all the more power in the hands of the federal government? And keep in mind, these colonies, which have just declared independence from Britain, are doing so to rid themselves of overburdening taxes and legislation that they disagree with, that they had no control over. So they create an extremely weak federal government, which would seem to be fine for them, because they desire self-rule. How did the colonists view themselves? As citizens of the United States of America? No. Go ahead, tell me.
Probably just of like where they're living.
Of their state, right?
Yeah.
You know, Texas seems to be one of the only places that I know of where people are like, I'm a citizen of the great state of, Texas, right? Rick Perry will say, hello from the independent state of Texas, or the sovereign state of Texas. You hear about these people who want to secede, Texas, the Texas secessionist movement, right? I'm not saying I'm for it, but if Texas seceded, I think I'd stay, right? I like Texas, okay? But they saw themselves as citizens of their own state. Jefferson saw himself as a citizen of Virginia. Boy, did he love Virginia. My wife is a descendant of his. So are my sons and daughter. I'm not. I just got to marry her. I will be buried. We're still debating this, but I lost. As long as my wife doesn't kick me out of her life, which I pray she doesn't because she's cool. When we die, we'll be buried on Monticello. That's Thomas Jefferson's property. Okay, her dad is buried from that wall right there to Thomas Jefferson's grave right there, that close. Monticello's Thomas Jefferson's house. He loved Virginia. Have you guys seen what the Thomas Jefferson Memorial looks like? It looks like Monticello. It's shaped like his house, okay? It's got that dome. And you go in that dome, it's really right now just a storage place for a bunch of garbage, but you go in, it echoes. Nobody wanted to stay in the room because it echoed too much, had this weird, if you ever get into a dome and you start talking, it like all reflects back, it's a weird tone. So he's like, man, it looked good at the time, but well, okay. So anyway, nobody wanted to ever go in there. But they saw themselves as citizens of the state, not of the country. This nationalism where people started recognizing themselves as citizens of the United States of America is not really going to take place until after the Civil War and after the unification of the two, the North and the South, and then even after that, where people are, okay, we're Americans, we're not just citizens of our states. So, entering into a constitution, a stronger constitution, which gave more power to the national government, the federal government, was a hard thing for the states and their citizens to do. All right? So I want you to keep that in mind. So there had to be a compromise that gave the smaller states more power. That took power from the larger states so that there would not be what's known as tyranny of the majority. Remember this idea that democracy is tyranny of the majority. See, we don't live in a straight democracy, right? We have a Republican form of government. there's a debate right now over, a lot of people want to get rid of what? The Senate. Have you heard this? That nobody's heard this. Oh, this idea is being floated. Why do they want to get rid of the Senate? They also want to get rid of the Electoral College. Why do they want to get rid of the Electoral College? What's
Because they want Americans to be able to elect people, and the Electoral College is kind of that they have all the representatives of each state, and so they
you have to win by states, right? With the Electoral College, you don't win. You have to understand, you don't win the presidential election by the popular vote. Okay, you win it by states. So when Trump and Biden they come to Texas, they're not trying to get just this big pool of votes. They are in Texas. They're trying to win Texas, the votes in Texas. Okay? Then they go to New York. They're trying to win the state New York. And then they're trying to win, and where they go to these states that have the most electoral votes, right, based on population. And then they go to battleground states, states that could go one way or the other that will determine the election, right? So Florida would be one. Ohio's a big state that's always battled for, okay? New York's always, at this point, always gonna go for the Democrats. California's always gonna go for the Democrats. Texas right now is a red state. It's gonna go for the Republicans, okay? Middle America is generally Republican. There are only two states between the coasts that really are blue, Democrat, New Mexico and Colorado. But you take those out of the mix, man, it's all red. And then the coasts are all blue, except for Florida, okay, which kind of goes either way. Battleground state. Okay, so why would you get rid of the Electoral College? To shut up all those middle states, right? Because when did they start having this conversation? After Hillary Clinton lost the election to Donald Trump, because she got 3 million more votes than he did in the popular vote, right? Total Americans voting. Why? Because New York and California have so many people, and so does Chicago, and they're all Democrats, and so of course she's going to have more votes in that regard. But Donald Trump won the states, more electoral votes via the states. And that's how it's broken down. So the goal is, now the same thing with the Senate. If the Senate has 2 votes, that means Montana has just as much power as New York does in the Senate, right? You get rid of the Senate, now it's all by representation. All the laws will be dictated by the most populous states. So, New York, Chicago, California, all the states there with the highest population, they'll have the most representatives. They pass bills in the House that doesn't have to go up to the Senate. The Senate, there's no equal footing there. It's just straight population. So you'd have unequal representation via the states. States would lose power. And why do people want that to happen? Well, because they realize these small states with their conservative views are getting in the way of our liberal desires. But remember, those states never would have entered into the Union if it was going to be that way, right? That was the compromise. We're not going to give up all of our power. Why would we join a union that we give you everything and you tell us what to do? Why would I do that? And so that's what's starting to be asked of them again. We need to get rid of the Senate, they're saying, because they're getting in the way of what we want. So we're still in this debate, even though we were in this debate 200 plus years ago. Okay, over 250 years ago. We're still in this debate over states' rights and states' power. And there's still talk about leaving the Union. Who's the most recent group that wants to leave the Union? And it happened once Donald Trump won election. Have you heard of Brexit?
Yes.
What is it? It's where Britain wanted to leave the European Union. And they are. They voted for it, it barely passed, and they're gonna do it one day. I don't know how and when, but they're still talking about it. Okay, but they voted on it, okay, and that's what's happening. It's not a bit, it was very unpopular amongst the other European states, but Britain's like, forget it, we're not part of you anymore, okay? Well, so, when Donald Trump became president, California decided there was a movement, and there's a petition being signed by many people. It's called Colexit, like the exit of California. And then, of course, Texas wants their own Texit, you know, to leave. And so states still want to break up the union because we want self-governance. We don't like big federal governments telling us what to do. And I especially don't like people who disagree with me, overpowering me, right? Especially when I live in an area where the group of people want one thing, and then people off in DC, Chicago, New York, California, they're telling me what to do, and I moved from those places to get away from them, right? Why would I want to do what they want me to do here? This is Texas, right? We're proud Texans, aren't we? Any non-proud Texans in here? Good. Well, with that being said, so when we talk about constitutions, we're talking about rules of government, and so they're stronger or weaker. And the goal of the new Constitution was a stronger federal government. Okay? Stronger than the Articles of Confederation. We needed it. But there had to be a compromise. And the compromise had to do with representation. All right, with that being said, what I'd like you to do is, let's just stick with the Declaration of Independence, okay? And that's your assignment, remember that, okay? I'll put up the folder. And then we will start working on the Constitution next time we talk, which will be Tuesday.